Oh, you're back. Or maybe this is the first time. Either way, welcome. So, as usual, a question before we dive in. Have you ever tried to help someone genuinely, patiently, repeatedly, and walked away feeling like you were the problem? Not because you did anything wrong, but because somehow, every single time, the conversation ended with you apologizing, you second-guessing, you feeling smaller than when you walked in. Yeah. Tonight we're talking about those people. Not to bash them, not to make you feel better about cutting them off, but to actually understand what's happening psychologically when you're in that dynamic. Because once you see it clearly, you might know how to deal with it properly. Here's a story about two people. We'll call them Ryan and... Actually, the other guy doesn't need a name. You probably already have one in mind. Ryan was the kind of person who genuinely believed people could change if you just gave them enough patience, enough understanding, enough of your time. Not naive, just optimistic in that quiet, stubborn way some people are. The other guy was different. On the surface, he seemed fine, confident even, strong opinions, always had something to say. And Ryan, being Ryan, mistook that for substance. But here's what Ryan didn't see at first, and what took him a long time to put into words. Everything this person did, every single thing, no matter how reasonable it looked from the outside, was designed consciously or not to serve one purpose: himself. So what's actually going on inside someone like this? Because calling them toxic or low vibration doesn't explain anything. It just labels it. Here's what the psychology actually looks like. The fragile ego underneath the loud confidence. People like this often carry a deep, unspoken fear of being ordinary, of being less than. And because they can't consistently outperform that fear in the real world, where people are smarter, more successful, more respected than them, they manage it by creating a smaller arena where they can always win. Ryan noticed this early. The other guy was different around people he perceived as above him, quieter, more careful, almost deferential. But around Ryan, around anyone younger, less experienced, or simply in a position where they couldn't push back, he expanded, took up space, became the authority on everything. He didn't need to be superior. He just needed someone around who made him feel that way. The double standard machine. Here's the move that Ryan kept getting caught by. The other guy had a rule. You must respect him when he speaks. You stand there, you listen, even if you've heard it before, even if it's wrong, even if you don't want to, because that is respect. But when Ryan spoke, when Ryan had something to say, suddenly respect was a two-way street with a very convenient traffic light. And this is the key psychological mechanic. It was never about the principle. It was never about respect or honesty or fairness. Those were just the vocabulary he used. The actual operating system underneath was simple. Whatever benefits me right now is correct. Whatever doesn't is a personal attack. Self-serving behavior in a helpful costume. The most disorienting part, the part that kept Ryan second-guessing himself, was that so much of what the other guy said sounded reasonable on the surface. Good advice, sensible observations, concern for Ryan's well-being. But here's what Ryan eventually learned to do. Strip away the surface and ask one question. Who benefits from this, really? And almost every time, the answer was the same person. The advice kept Ryan manageable. The concern kept Ryan close. The lessons kept the power dynamic exactly where it needed to be. It wasn't malicious necessarily. Some people aren't even fully aware they're doing it. But awareness doesn't change the effect. Here's what prolonged exposure to this dynamic actually costs, not in a dramatic crisis kind of way, more quietly than that. Ryan started editing himself, not consciously, just reflexively. He learned which topics caused an eruption, which phrases triggered defensiveness, which truths weren't worth the fallout. so he avoided them. And then he started avoiding slightly more, and then a little more. Until one day, Ryan realized he was walking on eggshells so consistently he'd forgotten what the floor felt like. And the worst part? He kept blaming himself because the other guy was very good at making that seem logical. Why do you always take things so personally? I'm just being honest. Not everyone can handle that. You're too sensitive. The language of someone who has never once genuinely asked, "Could I be wrong here?" The moment Ryan actually woke up wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a big fight. It wasn't a betrayal you could point to and say, "There, that's the thing." It was just a Tuesday, and Ryan was exhausted. Not physically. That specific kind of tired that comes from carrying weight that was never yours to carry. And for the first time, instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" Ryan asked a different question. What am I actually getting from this? Not, what should I be getting? Not, what did I hope for? What is actually measurably real in this exchange? And the answer was quiet and uncomfortable and very clear. Here's the thing nobody tells you about people like this. They rarely change. Not because they can't, theoretically, but because change requires one thing they structurally resist: asking themselves a hard question. And if you've spent any time with someone who deflects every mirror turned toward them, you already know. You cannot want someone's growth more than they do. You just can't. It doesn't work that way. Self-awakening is worth 100 times more than being awakened by someone else. Ryan learned that about himself. The other guy, still waiting for the world to rearrange itself around him. This is the part people get tangled in. Because most of us were raised on some version of never give up on people, or everyone deserves a chance. And well, there's truth in that. But there's a version of it that gets weaponized against people who care too much. You don't owe anyone unlimited access to your energy. You don't owe anyone patience that costs you your peace. And you especially don't owe someone the repeated opportunity to convince you that you're the problem when you're not. The philosophy question buried in all of this, and it connects directly to what we talked about in the morality episode, is this: how much do you owe other people versus how much do you owe yourself? And the honest answer is that those two things are not in opposition. Taking care of yourself is not selfishness. Recognizing that a relationship has no destination worth reaching and walking away from it is not coldness. It's just finally asking the right question about where your energy goes. And no, we're not going to call Ryan an empath for trying. That word gets thrown around too easily. He just cared. And then he learned when to stop. If you recognize someone in this video, maybe in Ryan, maybe in the other guy, maybe in both, sit with that for a second. Because awareness is the first move. Everything else follows from there. Leave a thought below. What was the moment you realized the energy wasn't worth it anymore? Until next time.